Hello. The question we're wanting to ask today is, how does Christianity view the Pharisees at the time of Jesus? And what are their views? And is it true? Is it true? Is it true? We have to remember that the Gospels were written, the first one was 29 AD, were all written by people who were followers of Jesus. So this is not like independent journalists who are just doing research on a historical figure, somebody, who lived and died, and they're wanting to do all the research and find out all about it and talk to people. So you're hoping you're going to get a balanced view. No, the Gospels, it was all written, all the New Testament was written by people who actually believed in Jesus. So the very fact that the people believed in Jesus, the writers of the Gospels, dictates how they view the Pharisees, what they chose to record, what they chose to record and what they chose not to, and also subsequently ahead what the church chose to bring into the canon of the New Testament and what they chose not to. And remember, all these choices are by people who actually believe in Jesus. So in the story of Jesus, the Pharisees are actually the baddies. The Pharisees are depicted as the baddies. They are the over-strict, zealous religious Jews who are ridiculously fanatic, and they can't do anything right, but they're doing everything wrong. And Jesus is constantly criticising them. And of course, Jesus is the goody in the story. Jesus is the goody in the Gospels. And so the Pharisees are painted as the baddies, right? We have to ask questions like, are the anecdotes in the Gospels actually true? Is it actually true, or is it rumours? Is it rumours? I mean, you take somebody 29 AD after the death of Jesus going and doing the research. Everybody wants their 5 minutes of fame. Do you remember what was going? Oh yes, I do. Yes, I remember everything in detail. Yes, I was there. Yeah, you heard everything on the cross, did? Oh yes, I heard everything. I heard everything, and I heard him talking to his mother, and I heard what Mary said, and I heard what the Robert did. Everybody wants the 5 minutes of fame. Are there any other sources in literature that would support this demonization of the Pharisees? Well, no. This demonization of the Pharisees is really only in the New Testament, right? And that they are painted as the baddies. But we have to ask, were they all bad? And if they were at odds with Jesus, were they justified? Were they justified? You're automatically assuming they're not justified. But I want to get you to think this through and to question that and to think, maybe the Pharisees weren't all bad, and maybe they had constructive things to say to Jesus. They were pointing out things to him that he needed to listen to and pay attention to, but he wouldn't. Right? He wouldn't. Now, the Pharisees will not have any problem with some of the teachings of Jesus about, give to the poor, and the little lady, and she gave out of nothing, and she didn't have much money, and she was generous, and you've got loads of money, and you don't give much, do you? If you've got 2 coats and the man over here hasn't got a coat, give him your coat. You've got 2 coats. Well, this is not actually just religious teachings. This is humanistic teachings, if you actually think about it. Because people of no religion, humanists would say, well, if somebody's got 2 coats and you've got somebody there with no coat, common sense would say, ask the person with 2 coats, would you be willing to give the person with no coat one of your coats? Would you consider it? Right? So The Pharisees would not have any problem with teachings like this, right? They wouldn't have any problem. That's not what they were at odds with Jesus about. What the Christian world doesn't understand and doesn't get is that the reason why they were at odds with Jesus was this is a man who claimed to be God. This is a man who said, I and the Father, which he means God, are one. No one can come to God the Father except through me. So he was setting himself as a mediator to God. He was also saying that he forgave sins. He was also saying things like, whatever you ask God the Father in my name, I will do it for you. It's like he believes he's God. He believes he's God's son also at the same time. This is the crux of the matter, and this is what the Christian world doesn't understand, because the Christian world doesn't realise that from a Jewish perspective, from the religion of Judaism, the religion of the Hebrew Bible, that what actually Jesus is speaking is blasphemy. He's equating himself to be God, God's son, God and God's son at the same time. He is saying you can't come to God but through me. He's saying he can forgive sins like God can do. Now, I know that the Christian world loves the idea of God taking flesh, making Mary pregnant. She gives birth to a baby. It's a baby who's God in the flesh. And then he grows up, and then he dies, and his life is viewed as a sacrifice. And if you put your faith in his blood, and he's died for you, and he's died for your sins, and so on. The Christian world loves the idea of God taking flesh. They think it's fantastic. It's like the Queen doing a walkabout. It's like President Trump going to the poorest village, the poorest town in the USA, and going on and visiting people in the most appalling housing conditions and walking in and sitting down and talking to people. That's how they view it. They love the idea of God taking flesh. To them it symbolises God caring about humanity. He's coming down to humanity and he's becoming flesh just like we are, and he knows what it is to be human and all of that. And this is why the Christian world loves it, right? This is totally at odds with the Jewish religion, and the Jewish teachings is where God is in heaven, and it is not for God to come down to our level, but we're to go up to his level, right? And that God doesn't take flesh, and that there's only one of him. The Jewish people believe, and it's there in the Hebrew Bible, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Right? Now, by Jesus saying that he was God's son, that he was also God, that he was one with God, that he was equal to God, that he was also his son, that he could forgive sins, that he could provide access to God, and so on. That was, as far as the Pharisees were concerned, was blasphemy. So I agree with the Pharisees. From a religious Jewish point of view, the Pharisees had done nothing wrong in criticising Jesus for what he said, because Jesus was equating himself to be God in the flesh and God's son, right? And that is a complete no-no. God has said to the Jewish people, it's there in the Hebrew Bibles, you shall have no other gods but me. I am the only God you will worship. Right? Now, Christians, as you know, worship Jesus. They worship Jesus. Right? They worship Jesus. They believe he is God, but he's also God's son. But they are worshipping him in exactly the same way as they would worship God. So you've got God in heaven, they worship him, and you've got Jesus standing there and they worship him. Right? This is Christianity. This is what they believe. Now, the Pharisees have been demonized for speaking up, really, for saying and telling Jesus that he was totally out of order and he was speaking blasphemy by the by some of the things he was saying, not all of the things. We're talking about the statements, I and the Father are one. This sort of thing. And the Pharisees were concerned because this was Jesus leading the Jewish people into idolatry. The most important thing, and that you see time and time again in the Hebrew Bible, is don't go to other idols. I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no one else. Only worship me. Don't worship anybody else. Right? And here you've got this man equating himself with God, saying he can forgive sins, saying whatever you ask for in his name, he will do it, which to me is stupid anyway. I mean, it's crazy. Who says such a thing? It is actually daft when you think about it. It makes no sense for somebody to say that. The God of Israel would never say to a Jewish person, look, pray for whatever you want and I'll do it. The God of Israel would never say that to anybody, because you know what people are like, the crazy things people will pray for. How many people pray to win the lottery? You know, we haven't got the sense humans. We can pray to God for the most ridiculous things. And in Judaism and in the Hebrew Bible, there has never ever been anything that can be construed as God saying to the Jewish people, you ask me for whatever you want and I'll do it. Because the God of Israel wouldn't do that, because he knows how stupid people are and the stupid things they'll be asking for. Right? Many prayers don't get answered, not because God hasn't heard them, it's because he doesn't think it's appropriate for him to do what you want him to do, for any number of reasons. You might not agree with the reasons, but God is God, and he decides whether to answer your prayer or not. And here you've got Jesus saying, whatever you ask God for in my name, I will do it. Well, isn't that stupid? That is stupid. That is totally irresponsible. And again, the Pharisees would be calling him up on that and saying, what sort of rubbish are you talking here? You cannot be teaching people this, the Jewish people, to be praying in your name to the God of Israel and just say, expecting anything they want and they're going to get it by quoting your name. This is ridiculous. This is totally irresponsible. This is taking God. It's just making a mockery and all of that, right? In terms of supposed inverted commas miracles, it is a fact that magic existed at the time of Jesus, just as it existed at the time when Moses went to see Pharaoh. And you remember, he threw down his staff and it turned into a snake, and then Pharaoh's magicians threw their staffs down and their staffs turned into snakes also. But Moses demonstrated the authority of the God of Israel by Moses' snake eating up all the magician's snake, right? So magic existed, has always existed. And again, you see, we don't actually know. We don't actually know. I think the first thing that makes the whole account suspect is the Gospels were written by the people themselves who actually had something at stake. They actually believed in Jesus. And they were wanting to believe everything that they were being told. So they were impartial. These people were not impartial. They weren't skeptical. They would have believed everything that was told them. And magic, when it's practiced, you know, people believe it. You know, if you saw a magician throw down something and it turned into a snake, if you didn't know any better, you might think this was a man of God. But of course it's not a man of God, it's a magician. So even if it had happened, it doesn't mean that God would have been with him. It doesn't mean that. It could just mean he's practicing the magic arts. But as I say, the writers are not willing to consider anything that the Pharisees have to say as being good and positive and constructive. Their role as writers is to turn the Pharisees into total baddies. They're the ones that are not believing in Jesus. They're the ones who said, you are not the Messiah. You are speaking blasphemy. Right? They would have been the ones behind the decision to hand Jesus over to Rome. Now, looking at this in a historical context, bearing in mind that Jesus was viewed as speaking blasphemy by the religious people, they would understand that he was speaking blasphemy and leading people astray into idolatry. So he was saying, Jesus is all about Jesus. This is all about believing in me. I forgive sins. I am this. Believe in me. I am the one you've got to believe in. You know. So what Jesus is doing is perverting things, and he's leading the Jewish people into idolatry by actually focusing on him and believing that they've got to believe in him. And if they don't, then they're going to go to hell anyway, because this is the message of Christianity, right? So, I don't think the Gospels actually do give us a fair and reasoned and balanced view of the Pharisees, because the Christian attitude towards, they call it legalism, and it's viewed on in a very negative way, because Christianity has a very negative view of law. What Christianity doesn't understand is that the laws of God given to the Jewish people are the laws of God given to the Jewish people, right? These are God's laws. And my experience as an evangelical Christian for 42 years was that Christianity has a contempt for the very laws of God given to the Jewish people. Anything to do with law, Christianity has an utter contempt for. So they have a contempt for the Pharisees, whose job it was, very conscientiously. You always get one or two characters who are perhaps very, very, very perhaps a bit overzealous maybe sometimes in the application of trying to get the Jewish people to obey the laws of God. But in spirit, they're not doing anything wrong, the Pharisees. They're trying to get the Jewish people to follow the laws of God. That's their remit. Now, Christianity, in my experience, particularly evangelical Christianity, has a total and utter contempt for the very laws of God given to the Jewish people. The evangelical Christians and missionaries believe that no Jewish person is capable of observing the laws of God. But this is in direct contradiction to God himself, who has actually said in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the laws I'm giving you today are not too difficult for you to do. They're not too difficult for you to do, right? There is nothing wrong with the laws of God given to the Jewish people. Christianity has taken the view that, misleadingly, I would argue, that no Jew is capable of observing the law, that if they break any of the laws, even accidentally, they're automatically going to go to hell, right? And this is why they've got to put the faith in Jesus. But this is not how the law works. Christianity itself is ignorant on actually how the Jewish laws actually work, because these are laws given solely to the Jewish people on how to lead their lives. These laws were not given to the non-Jewish people. It was only given to the Jewish people. And the Christian world, which is largely non-Jewish, the evangelical Christians, a small percent, have a total and utter contempt for these laws given to the Jewish people. They also have a contempt for any rabbi who is trying to help the Jewish people and help them understand and help them to apply these laws in the modern age. So evangelical Christianity has nothing but contempt for the very laws of God. And so they have contempt for the Pharisees in the Hebrew Bible who are trying to protect the Jewish people from people like Jesus who are coming along saying, believe in me, I'm with God, I'm one with God, I forgive sins, I am the way, the truth, the life, no one comes to God but through me, all of that. This is what the Pharisees were concerned about, and it was their duty as rabbis, as Jewish leaders of the community, to not only reprimand Jesus and point out to him exactly where he was going wrong in his teachings, but also to tell the Jewish people, don't be following this guy. This is idolatry. This is leading you into idolatry. Have nothing to do with it. Now, looking at it historically, I would say that I can understand why Jesus was handed over to Rome. Looking at it from their perspective, I understand it. Because if you've got somebody like Jesus who is leading the Jewish people into idolatry, saying to them, look, if you want to believe in God, you've got to come through me. If you want your sins forgiven, you've got to come through me. Me and God are one. I and the Father are one. He's setting himself up as God, as God's Son. All of that. He's speaking blasphemy. And the Pharisees recognize that. Now, it's interesting with all these so-called miracles because people are very much impressed with magic. And people do like magic. And people are easily fooled and taken in by it. And the God of Israel does warn the Jewish people about this. And there's never been an expectation in Jewish tradition, thought, ideas that the Messiah would practice miracles. No, this is something probably the Christian world doesn't know. There was never ever a belief that the Messiah would be a person who would do miracles like Jesus supposedly did, right? Doing miracles, so-called miracles, inverted commas, does not mean that a person comes from God or is legitimate. It could mean they're practicing the magic arts. And in spirituality, you have to understand there are different tiers, right? But again, we don't actually know. We only know from the accounts given in the Gospels, right? Which do sound very, very convincing. There's a lot of emphasis on the miracles, but the irony is, this won't impress the Jewish people because the Jewish people know and have been warned by the God of Israel to be careful about people who are supposedly doing magic and miracles. So the God of Israel has actually warned the Jewish people about people going around practicing different things in order to lure them away and to get them involved in other beliefs, leading them astray from the God of Israel. But the non-Jewish world loves it. The non-Jewish world loves it and is impressed with it. Now you have to remember St. Paul also was a Pharisee, and he understood from his study, extensive study, and his religious background that Jesus couldn't be the Messiah. He knew it, and he understood it from the Hebrew Bible. And this is what Christians have never think about, is the fact that St. Paul would have known himself from the Hebrew Bible why Jesus couldn't be the Messiah, and he knew because he was speaking blasphemy. He knew that. That's why he was so against the believers in Jesus, because he realised they were speaking blasphemy and he wanted them dead, because he thought to himself, well, better kill these people, because the way he was looking at it, rightly or wrongly, St. Paul was thinking, it's better to kill these people because these people will be going around and leading the Jewish people into idolatry. So the best thing would be to kill them, because the sooner we nip this in the bud, the better, because we don't want the Jewish people straying into idolatry and worshipping Jesus, right? Then St. Paul had a spiritual experience. He believes he met Jesus, right? And so on. So St. Paul actually came to faith in Jesus not through his study of the Hebrew Bible, ironically. He didn't study the Hebrew scriptures and say, oh, I believe in this Jesus because of this. No. That's not how it worked with St. Paul. St. Paul came to faith in Jesus solely based on a spiritual experience. He believed he met him. He then goes back to the Pharisees and argues with them. I'm right, I've met Jesus. He said this to me, he said that to me. And the Pharisees would say, well, obviously something's happened to you. They would realise something's happened to him. But they said it doesn't mean what you think it means. But you see, Paul being Paul, he's a hothead. That's his nature, that's his disposition. And he goes off on his own. No, I'm right. He believes he's right and they're wrong. He then goes back to the Hebrew scriptures and he starts looking for a way of rereading the Jewish scriptures in such a way that it matches up with his new belief in Jesus. He's got to explain this spiritual experience. He's got to explain it. It was so profound. It had such a devastating effect on him that he's got to find a way of justifying it. And that is the theology of St. Paul. The beliefs of Christianity are coming from a man who believed in Jesus, that came to this belief not through the study of the Hebrew scriptures, which Jews for Jews go on about. It was through a spiritual experience. He then goes back to the scriptures and sort of twists it all round to fit in with his spiritual experience. Now, how do Christians see the Pharisees, and how does this affect the way they see Jews nowadays, particularly Orthodox Jews? Well, evangelical Christians will be reading their Bible every single day, if not once a day, twice a day. They will be going to church, if not once a day, twice a day on Sunday. They'll also be going to Bible studies. How many born-again Christians have read and reread those Gospels? Everything in the New Testament that's anti the Jews, the Pharisees, the Jews, the Pharisees. Again and again, the evangelical born-again Christian is hearing in church, is reading in their home, hearing at Bible studies, the Jews this, the Jews that, the Pharisees this, the Pharisees that, and it's all completely 100% negative. The fact that there isn't more, the fact that it's amazing there isn't more persecution of the Jews than there has been, really, because it's this view of the Pharisees and St. Paul's ideas that have fed Christianity and demonized all the rabbis, all Orthodox Judaism, anything Jewish. It's like the Pharisees is depicted as the demon, the devil that is against Jesus the goody. Yeah? The people that are going against God, even, how Christians see it. And no wonder that the Christians, no wonder they're persecuted. No wonder it happened. Because the problem with Christianity is it won't learn from Judaism that God is one, that God doesn't take flesh, that God doesn't have a son, and that to worship Jesus is actually blasphemy. And this is what Christianity will not accept. Christianity, although it goes on about it being the younger brother of the Jewish people, the Jewish people, like Pope Paul said, you're the older brother, we're the younger brother, and all this. This is all rubbish, because quite honestly, if Christianity really wanted to learn from the Jewish people they would listen and pay attention to the fundamental belief of Judaism, that God is one, that he doesn't take flesh, that he doesn't have a son, and that the Jewish people only worship God and do not worship a man who claims to be God or God's son or both. Neither do they believe in human sacrifice. The God of Israel has said to the Jewish people, have nothing to do with human sacrifice. Don't sacrifice anybody for sin. Well, Christianity believes that the blood of Jesus is an atonement that covers for sin. But in Judaism, under the Jewish law, the very laws of God, it has no validity. The blood of Jesus has no validity under the very laws of God given to the Jewish people. Because God himself, in the very laws of God, God himself has prescribed to the Jewish people what the atonement process is. And the atonement process does not involve human blood. Even if you do think it's God's blood, even if you do think it's the Son of God's blood, the blood of a human being is not acceptable to God, to the God of Israel. And this is what Christianity doesn't understand. If Christianity accepted the fundamental beliefs of Judaism as stated in the Hebrew Bible, the very basics, God is one, I am the Lord your God and I am one. I am the Lord your God and have no other gods before me. Don't worship anybody else but me. Don't sacrifice your daughters. Don't sacrifice anybody for sin. Right? I am the Lord your God and you shall have no other. If they actually adhered to that, they would realise that they shouldn't be believing in Jesus. Now, there is a very small movement of born-again Christians it's very small, who are beginning to realise this very fact, that they shouldn't actually be worshipping Jesus, that they are mistaken, and that the person they only should be worshipping is the God of Israel. But to get back to the beginning, when an evangelical Christian is reading the New Testament, the Gospels, twice a day, midweek, Bible studies, church, twice on Sunday, and they're doing this every single day of their lives, it is understandable even that they would develop a very negative view of Orthodox Jews. It's inevitable because the drip by drip effect of actually hearing so much negativity spoken about Orthodox Jews, the Pharisees, and Jews in general in the New Testament, it can't help but turn the reader against the Jew. It's inevitable. It is inevitable. It's a drip by drip effect. It's extraordinary that the anti-Semitism from Christians wasn't even worse than it has been. It's a wonder it isn't even continuing now in great effect. But it's still there. But it's very, very subtle, and it will always be denied. It will always be denied. Since the 1970s, when the evangelicals had a conference in the 1970s, and the question was, how are we going to get these Jews to convert to Christianity? What they'd originally been trying to do, and they wanted to do, and they succeeded in doing, but not always, the goal was to convert the Jew to believe in Jesus, to get them to knock out everything Jewish out of them, to get them to be churched and to think like a non-Jew and to have nothing to do with any Jewish rite or belief or religious practice, to knock everything Jewish out of them, to knock everything that's in the Old Testament out of them, to knock all the adherence to the Jewish law that God had given the Jewish people, knock it out of them. And that's what they've been trying to do for 2,000 years. But suddenly in the 1970s they thought, well, let's find another way of trying to get these Jews to believe in Jesus. Because they want Jesus to come back, you see. So they think we've got to please him, so we'll try and get more Jews converted. So they suddenly hit upon the advertising of, I know, let's re-emphasise the Jewishness of Jesus to such an extent that Jews will think they can believe in Jesus and still be Jewish, right? They can still wear a yarmulke, they can still go to the synagogue, they can still, say Jewish prayers if they want, but the main thing, but they're believing in Jesus. So it's almost like a compromise, right? Because they're suddenly realising we've got to make adjustments here, and the only way we're going to get these Jews to believe in Jesus is we've got to make Jesus as appealing as possible by making him sound like the perfect Jew, the Jew that's never puts a foot wrong, Jesus, the Jew who goes to the synagogue every week, Jesus who wears a yarmulke, Jesus who wears tzitzis, Jesus the Jew, he likes chopped liver, he likes kneidels, he likes chicken soup. So make him seem as Jewish as possible, and then Jewish people think, oh, well, he's Jewish, it's all right to believe in him. When really, what the Jewish people are believing in Jesus don't realise is they're actually worshipping a man who they think is God. And it's leading the Jewish people into idolatry. But it's an indirect way, you see. This is where it's very clever. Now, Jews for Jesus, in their trying to convert Jews to believe in Jesus, they know that if they were to say to a Jewish person, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, Jesus, whoever believes in him will not die but have everlasting life. If they know, if they said that to a Jew, most Jews would just say, I'm not interested, walk away. They don't say that. What they say to the Jew is, well, Jesus was Jewish. Maybe he is the Messiah. Maybe he is the Messiah. Perhaps the rabbis are mistaken. Blah, blah, blah. They're coming at it in a different act. They're coming at things in a different way. Right? But it's the end goal is the same. The end goal is to get the Jew to worship Jesus. The end goal is to get Jewish people to worship Jesus, to believe in Jesus. Now, in my experience, evangelical Christianity has no respect for the very laws of God given to the Jewish people. They believe the Jewish laws are a waste of time for any Jew to observe. They have so much contempt, it's extraordinary how they can view commandments given by God to the Jewish people with such contempt, but they do. They also have total contempt for anything any rabbi has to say. And this again stems from the contempt for the Jews and the Pharisees from the New Testament. Because for a non-Jew, the Christian, in the non-Jewish world, the Christian equates the Pharisee with any Orthodox Jew. Any religious Jew, to the non-Jewish Christian's mind, becomes a Pharisee, you see. And the Pharisees have been demonized in the New Testament. The Pharisees are the baddies. The Pharisees are ones who are apparently fusspots, and they're the baddies in the stories. They're unfair, they're cruel, they're tyrannical. There is nothing good said about, very little said good about the Pharisees. And Jesus is the goody. Jesus is the goody. The presumption in the New Testament, in the Gospels, is that Jesus is legitimate, right? But this is understandable because the Gospels and the John's Gospel also, it has been written by people who actually believe in Jesus. These are not independent journalists who are just giving 6 of one and half a dozen of another. These are people who are actually committed Christians, committed believers in Jesus. And the goal of the Gospels is to get people to believe in Jesus. Because you have to remember, what is the role of the writer? What is the role of the Gospel writer? What is the role of the church distributing these Gospels to people? What is the purpose? The purpose is that you believe it. The purpose is that you believe in Jesus. That is the whole point. They're distributing literature that is not impartial. It's not like researching something in history. This is not a history book. We're getting to the crux of the matter. The New Testament is not a history book. It's a book of faith. It's not a history book. It's a book that people believe in. They believe whatever's written in there, right? And they're not interested in the historical facts. They're only interested in what is written in this book, which is not a book of history. It's a book of faith. It's a book that the writers are calling you to believe in every single word that they are stating as being true. Right? They're not writing that book for you to doubt it. They're writing those Gospels, and the church is mass producing it so that you will believe in it. That's the difference. That's the difference. You're not supposed to question it. You're supposed to accept it as being true and valid. And history, anything in history would, if it's against what the New Testament says, then the New Testament will be right and history would be wrong. In other words, religion comes as being the truth, and it overrides history in terms of who is right. Right? So it's about, remember Galileo and the view of the world, how you actually view the world. The church determining how they viewed the world. And then clever clogs, Galileo, or whatever, they can prove that they're mistaken. But who is the church insisting is right? They're right. They're right. And that is the role of this Bible, of the New Testament that Christians believe in. It is a book of faith that you're supposed to believe. You don't question it. You don't question it. You accept everything as being true. And if you're reading this every single day of your life, as I did for 42 years, you're going to church twice on Sunday, you're going to a Bible study in the week and other things. Over that time, you are drip by drip getting a negative, totally negative view of the Jews, and particularly the Pharisees, and to the non-Jewish mind, a Pharisee is any religious Jew. And this is how you can get a demonization of a people. One might ask, in today's world, in Great Britain, would the New Testament be allowed to be published? There might be an argument from some people here in the UK that it shouldn't be published because it's anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic because you have to decide, when you're looking at literature, how balanced it is, how true it is. Is this a caricature? Is this a caricature? Are the Pharisees being portrayed as a caricature? Have they been exaggerated by the writer of the Gospels? So the Jew doesn't just have a Semitic type nose. I've got a little bit of a nose, a Jewish nose. I have from the side a little bit of a nose. That's no surprise. Both my parents were Jewish, a little bit. You know, you can see, little bit. So just like the Nazis would treble my nose up, they would probably make my nose 4 times bigger to emphasise my Jewishness. And if they did that, you would look at me and say, oh, there's the Jew. At the moment, you might not think, oh, she could, I don't know, yes, no. Jewish people would look at me and say, yeah, I think she's Jewish. But non-Jewish people would look at me and say, well, I don't know, she doesn't look particularly Jewish. But if they trebled the size of my nose, you would probably be thinking, yeah, actually, she does look Jewish. And so what I'm suggesting to you is maybe the writers of the Gospels have actually trebled the negativity of the portrayal of the Pharisees, in the same way the Nazis exaggerated the caricature of a Jew, not only in the art in terms of how they actually physically draw a Jew, the Jew, but also in how they view their personal traits and qualities. I mean, every nation and every race and nationality, even regionally, we all have different traits, don't we? Like how could I say, like Irish people are they love to talk, they're great talkers, right? But that's not racist, they do love to talk. They have a fantastic sense of humour. They're great fun. They have a great sense of humour. They're very easygoing. They're extremely friendly. They're very hospitable. These are the traits of the Irish people, right? But they also might have other traits. And you see, when you are depicting a nationality, a race, or a people, if it's exaggerated to such an extent that it can cause other people to hate them or to look down on them, then it can be considered racist, right? Now, there was a time in the United Kingdom when Scottish people who were part of the United Kingdom, the standard joke here in the United Kingdom, well, when I was a child, it was always done in a good humour, was Scottish people are tight with the money, right? They're called skinflints. They're kind of tight with the money. But it was always, and it was often in jokes. Comedians would use it in jokes. So, but nobody ever took offence. Scottish people didn't take it. Nobody took offence because the reason was it was all done in a good-natured way, right? It was done in a good-natured way. People living in England or people living in Wales or Ireland were not against Scottish people. There's nothing like that. It was just taking the mickey in a good-natured way about each other's specific characteristics as a people, you know. I mean, like the English, sometimes we're very polite, which is a good thing, but sometimes we can be sometimes a bit over polite, you see, and some people could perhaps take the mickey of an English person, because sometimes we overdo it with our politeness. We're so busy trying to be polite that we sometimes get over polite, and then people think it's funny, and they might make fun of us, but they're not meaning to be nasty. It's good-natured teasing. Now, but the problem is with the New Testament and the depiction of the Jews in the Gospels. In today's world in the United Kingdom, I question whether the Gospels would even be allowed to be published in the United Kingdom, because the Jewish community could very well say, look, this is demonizing our people. This is demonizing our people in history. And this group of people, the Pharisees, were religious Jews, but there is no historical evidence that they were as bad as these people are saying. So what the Jewish people are legitimately able to question is say, is this historically correct? Is the New Testament Gospels historically correct in the portrayal of the Pharisee? Is it correct? Or has it been exaggerated? Has the depiction of the Pharisee by the New Testament writers been exaggerated so much, like the Third Reich demonizing the Jew in the 1930s, right? Perhaps even taking positive qualities of the Jewish people and inverting it, or whatever you want to call it, and turning it into a negative, right? Now, for instance, I'll give you a good example. there's this the whole thing about the Jewish people ruling the world. It's amazing how many non-Jews still think that the Jewish people are running the world, right? And I think this stems from the fact that we are, as a people, not every single one of us, and certainly not me, we have got something about us. We're very enterprising people, right? We've got a lot of zumph. We've got a lot of get up and go. We're very smart. We're very savvy. We're very good at business. And we've learnt through persecution how to survive in terms of trying to make a living and look after your family when you're being persecuted, how to somehow succeed and keep a business on the ground when you're being persecuted left, right and centre. And we are go-getters. We're the sort of people that we don't just talk about doing something, we go out there and do it. We've got to do it. Yeah, we make an impact on the world, right? And that comes from Judaism, and that comes from the commandments of God. We are called to go out there and make an impact on the world, change the world, make it better, be a doctor, be a judge, change the world, make it better. You want justice in this world, you want medical aid, you want people to be able to see a dentist, trained to be a dentist, a Jewish dentist. We are a go-getting people. There's nothing wrong with that. But what the world has done has taken that and perverted it, and has now said that the Jews are running the world, which is rubbish. But this is where anti-Semitism, what anti-Semitism is basically taking everything that's positive about the Jewish people and demonizing it, right? Anything. So a Jewish person, because they're, as a people, we are used to being persecuted. We are used to having to be uprooted and move country and having to fend and look after our family and extended family and the business and handling the money, and we've got to have money for the rainy day and, you know, have something. You never know what happens in life. We could be moved, we could be persecuted, the church is after us again. It's got to do all that. So we have to use our noggin and think how we're going to survive. So the Jewish people have been developed an aptitude for survival, which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. But again, the Christian world demonizes it. The non-Jewish world demonizes those very qualities and says, oh, you're a load of hoarders. You're all saving, you're all rich and you won't give to the poor. And they just demonize the Jew. So any good in the Jew is taken to be the devil. And this all, at root of it, comes from the Gospels. Because what the Pharisees were doing were legitimately questioning Jesus on the things he was saying. With things that rabbis today, with a man like Jesus today, if he emerged in the Jewish community saying, writing articles in the Jewish Chronicle, I am the way, the truth, the life, and no one can come to God but through me. If you had a Jewish big celebrity writing articles like that in the Jewish press, the rabbis will be speaking out against it. The Jewish establishment will be speaking out against it, and they would be very worried for the world Jewish community that they would be influenced, because they would realise this is idolatry and leading the Jewish people astray. So in fact, there is no difference. And I think the Pharisees, I mean, the situation was, they were in, whatever they did, they would be criticised. But probably the root of it was trying to get Jesus out of circulation. And I would agree with that. You really want somebody like Jesus at the time of Jesus, who's speaking blasphemy, who's telling Jewish people, you've got to believe in me, follow me, I am God, you know, I am the Father, I want all of that. They would probably think, well, put him in prison, get him in prison, get him out of circulation. And you have to look at the motives. And really, from a strictly speaking, from a Jewish point of view, the motives were not bad. The motives were purely good. What the Pharisees were trying to do was protect the Jewish people from a man who believed he was God in the flesh and that he was also God's son, and that in order to have access to God, they had to believe in him. And that was a complete no-no. The Pharisees recognised that Jesus was speaking blasphemy, and it was their job to try and do everything possible to get Jesus out of circulation so he could not lead the nation and lead all these vulnerable Jews into idolatry.